What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the Counting Wisdom podcast. I wanted to just make a podcast for today, um, you know, stating the obvious of how, because we are still here, I think on some level, we can realize that, Jesus is going to rapture us or take us out of here, when the time is right. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, talk a little bit about end times, and just offer my podcast for today. And so, I think a lot of us can use the time that we have to get right with God. I think many of us as Christians, do sometimes have things that we are still overcoming or working on. And I want to take a look at Revelation chapters 2 and 3, just so we can discuss a little bit about, what Jesus is talking about when he is saying that we need to overcome. But anyway, if you're like me, in some way, you can live life and realize, wow, there's something that I need to work on. There's something that I'm not necessarily perfect in some form. I know even just as far as some, I don't know, career goals, there may be some things that, I still need time to reach a certain goal that I may have. But even, strictly talking about our Christian life, there may be things where you're working on, you could literally be working on reading the whole Bible through and through. I know that I didn't start reading the Bible until my 20s or so. And I know that there are, probably people out there who maybe started earlier in high school or, started reading the Bible personally when they were younger than that. And so it doesn't have to be reading the Bible. It could be overcoming a particular sin. It could be overcoming anger issues. It could be, substance abuse. There are different things that I know I want to use my time wisely to overcome. I think one thing that I'm discovering is that there are, so many things that God is asking us to do that I don't know if it really boils down to, really looking at every little thing and trying to cross, every T and dot every I. Because I do think, when we focus on, a few things like love or, keeping some of the basic 10 commandments, I know there are a lot of sins that, can stem from the 10 commandments. And so I think, that same concept can go to, other things that we're trying to overcome that, if we work on maybe trying to love other people, love our enemies, then, other things will fall into place when we are trying to work on some of the overarching things. And so, one of the things that I mentioned, in the beginning of this podcast was how we are still here, we're still here, and we're waiting for the rapture. I know when you think about actually going to heaven, I think for many of us, I know at times when I think about it, it can sound pretty crazy when you talk about, standing before God. I think it can also be sort of fearful when you think about, standing before God, seeing angels, seeing other saints, and realizing, wow, this is all real. I kind of was interested in making a a video on doubts, because I think there are many things that can sort of challenge our faith. I think I mentioned this in regards to being overwise, is that, sometimes I notice that when you can study certain things, that you may sort of think is sort of harmless, I think it can really challenge our faith. When you talk about maybe studying the Big Bang Theory, or studying, you know, um, something in regards to astronomy, or, depending on where your source is coming from, I know that, some of these things can be hurtful to our faith. And so I think in the last days, I know that there are some people who have challenges even believing what they hear in the news, or even believing, what, kind of comes across the internet. And so I think a lot of us, can have trouble, really believing the Bible. I notice that, as more and more things go underground and go in secret, it can be challenging to even believe, how sinful people are. Just because, especially as Christians, hopefully we are not necessarily hanging out with people who aren't, really Christians or really good Christians. But I know I can remember seeing more and more sins when I started to actually have more of a social life and broadening. I remember back in the day, I wasn't necessarily concerned with hanging out with Christians, or hanging out with people who are at least walking with God, like I feel like I can walk with God. Not that I'm always walking with God, super closely, but, I know that, if you were to hang around some people long enough, you would see, more and more sinful things. And I think, my whole point is that, I think there are many things that in this world, obviously the devil is trying to challenge our faith, challenge our belief in the Bible. When you talk about being deceived, many people, it's not, just because, they may have a knowledge that there's a God, but they may be deceived about God. They may just have a belief that, oh, I know there's a God, and, I think I'll go to heaven, or, I don't really know if the Bible is true, but, I know there is a God. But a lot of people, even though they may know the truth, they may be deceived in regards to, someone presenting some other truth and believing that over, what they know is true. A great example is Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, they knew the truth about God. They knew the truth about the tree. The tree of knowledge of good and evil. God told them that, hey, once you eat that, you will die. But yet the devil, came in and challenged what they knew. And so I think sometimes, especially when we are just believing everything, and when we hear something, we can sort of just take it as truth. And, Adam and Eve, that's what happened to them, is that, they decided to eat the tree thinking that, oh, maybe what I heard from God, it's the truth, but maybe there's a little bit more to it than that, and so I think in the last days, there are things that I believe can deceive us and challenge us, even within the Christian community. Just like the book of Jude says, it says that, ministers ungodly ministers have slipped in unaware, meaning that we don't fully recognize that this minister is ungodly. You can't necessarily tell by the way they're preaching. Even though there is, I think definitely some red flags that can come up, but even then you are sort of, not fully sure. And so the book of Jude says that there are many things that can sort of challenge our belief in the Bible. And so, I just wanted to mention that in regards to, some of the things that I believe, can really hurt us in regards to our walk with Christ. So anyway, let's look at Revelation chapters 2 and 3. I think that these are, some great scriptures that I think, can bring us some insight into kind of the process of overcoming. So starting at Revelation chapter 2, it says, "To the angel of the church of Ephesus write, these things says he who holds the 7 stars in his right hand, who walks in the midst of the 7 golden lampstands. I know your works, your labor, your patience, that you cannot bear those who are evil, and you have tested those who say they are apostles and are not, and have found them to be liars. And you have persevered and have patience, and have labored for my name's sake, and have not become weary. Nevertheless, I have this against you, that you have left your first love. Remember therefore from where you have fallen, repent, and do the first works, or else I will come to you quickly, and remove your lampstand from its place, unless you repent." So one of the common themes, I believe, in these passages in Revelation chapters 2 and 3 is that, Jesus is sort of calling us. One, I think he's pointing out our sins, things that, one, maybe we are sort of trying to hide, but also things that we may be unaware, that we are doing that is wrong. And so, he's pointing these out and telling us, hey, you guys need to change this in regards to how you're living. You need to change this. And, if you don't, he's also giving us that motivating factor about, hey, if you do not change, you could face a consequence. And so, I think that's one of the things, that God is telling us, that I think that's one of the main reasons why, we may feel challenged or, may feel like God is threatening us in some way, is because, he's pushing us to change. It's not just for the very fact of threatening us for no reason, or, what we would maybe call evil, and so God is trying to bring us, a change into us. And I think I find in this passage too, that God is also giving us time. I mentioned this in the beginning of how we can use the time that we are waiting on Christ to return to address some of the problems that we have in our life. Now, I know that some pastors may say, hey, you're never going to fix everything about your life, until you get to heaven. But, I want to sort of challenge myself and challenge us, whoever's listening to this, to say that, hey, we shouldn't just, try to stay where we are until the rapture or until we die. We should use the time that we have to, change and to bring about, a different outcome in our life than what we may, expect when we are just assuming that, hey, I'll change once I, get raptured. Okay, let's continue reading. Verse 6, "But this you have, that you hate the deeds of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate." Verse 7, He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will give to eat from the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. And so God is clearly also challenging us from the standpoint of something bad happening to us, but also the challenge is a reward for something good that can happen to us in the future. And in this particular verse, it is to eat from the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. And so, I don't think I'm going to go through all of Revelation chapter 2 and 3. But, I have done that before, but I think there are different things that, we can learn from these two chapters. And so now, I think I want to just transition to talking in general about end times. One thing that I've said before is that, I think there are many people who do maybe know something is wrong with the world, but don't necessarily take a biblical approach to it. I think, some may say, oh, the world is just worse because, there are more people and we have to do something about, more people. Maybe we need to, put a limit on how many babies families can have or people can have. Or we need to, do something about the climate, whether we are, switching to electric vehicles. And one thing I notice is that, many people, can, come to that knowledge of, wow, something is going on in the world. But I think a lot of us can sort of get lulled is what I think it's called, but, kind of like dreamy-eyed into thinking like, wow, there's nothing really that we have to do in this world from a biblical perspective. And so I think that's something that we can, really kind of take notice of in regards to end times, is that, we have to more take a faith perspective. And I do think there are some physical things that we can do in regards to being prepared for the end times. I do think that, maybe we can try our best to store up food. Maybe we can try to, prepare our home in some way. There are different things that I think that we can do to sort of, help us, help ourselves, prepare for the end times. But I think this really depends on, where you live. I think, if you're in a place like Ukraine or Nigeria or, Haiti, those places are in a much different state of the world than what we are in. And I do believe that, those types of things do seem to be spreading in regards to, I think the chaos is just, spreading across the world. But, at the same time, for us that are not necessarily in those extreme cases, I think, there are certain things that certain steps that we can take to, prepare for end times, like end days preppers. But, also taking that spiritual, biblical perspective is what God is looking for. When you look at the case of Enoch, God wanted us to learn from that story that we need to try to please God. And what I've noticed is that, it's actually harder than I think about it. I know that for some of us, maybe stronger than others. I know that, some people may read their Bible most of the day or, have something that really strengthens them. And what I've learned is that, there are certain things that, can present a challenge, and, a person may not necessarily, be able to, you know, overcome quickly some of the challenges that they have in their life. And so, I do think that the best bet for us is to, stick with a biblical perspective, even though, I do think, like I was saying, there are some advantages to, taking more of a practical stance, like, end days prepping and different things like that. But, it would be so great if, on these television shows or these broadcasts that come on TV, that people would be telling each other to take more of a biblical perspective, And then one other thing that I wanted to say is that it would be great if, people were also, not ignoring, a lot of the problems and issues that they may have. And I think that's one of the downsides, even though, I do think on some level we may not necessarily be able to address every wrong problem or thing that is going on in our world or around our world. And so in some cases, you do try to, make the best of life, and I can understand that for sure. It can be stressful to have a problem where you don't necessarily know the answer, or you're waiting on God to solve the answer. But at the same time, I think many people do not, ask God, ask Jesus Christ to help them in their particular issue. And I think many people don't, take a biblical perspective. When you think about the news stations, they may tell you, this news issue that's going on in the world. They may tell you, hey, this is what's going on. But yet, they don't offer you any real advice. They may offer you some sort of temporary solution, but they don't offer you a real advice. And as Christians, we know the power of God, the power of the Bible, the power of Jesus Christ. At least we should. And so for someone to, ignore, the Bible, and ignore, giving someone that biblical advice, I think is, a pretty big sin. And so I think those are the two things that I wanted to mention in regards to end times, is that, we can't ignore the issues in our world. And I doubt that many of us Christians, are really, truly ignoring him. But, on some level, I already know, if there are certain things that if I wasn't necessarily obligated to continue to do, as in regards to maybe my job, in regards to, different things, I think that there are some changes that need to be made in this world. But yet there are some people in this world who seem to just continue going, who seem to just, ignore the problem, ignore the issue, and, continue, acting as if there's not a major issue going on. And I know many of the people of the world think, oh, if I have a problem, I'm just going to shoot, or I'm going to, solve it with weapons, or solve it with money. And, a lot of these problems are so complex that, it really requires faith in Jesus Christ and, him to believe. And so, anyway, hopefully this was helpful to someone. Hopefully you got something from it. I think that, there are many signs of the times that are happening, But I think on some level they will reach a sort of climax in regards to, certain issues that, do have to sort of have a moment where, you're not going to see anything bigger than that until we get to the tribulation. I do believe the tribulation, has those climactic, those climactic issues that, you're trapped here and you're having these cataclysmic judgments of God happen. But, for us living in the time before the rapture, I don't know if, all of these issues can be, I don't know if we're going to see much change in regards to earthquakes and fires and different things like that. I think there is some level of normal that it's going to reach before the tribulation, just because Jesus says that, Jesus said that same thing in the Gospels. So anyway, thanks so much for checking out this podcast. Hopefully this was helpful to someone. Hopefully you got something from it, and I will talk to you on the next one. See ya.